there's this balance, isn't it? And I think it all stems back from, okay, do we have a really, and so many companies, Bill, don't have this. Do we have a really, really firm understanding of what our ideal engineer profile looks like? So many companies will go to technical, and they will avoid of the, avoid is the wrong word. They'll overlook a lot of important things like you referenced there. You know, understanding how the business flow, the business operations flow. It's such an obvious thing that perhaps anyone that hasn't kind of come from defense and military, of course, you know, when you're in the field in Afghanistan, for example, and you know, you're there as a field engineer to make sure that these critical assets are operational, you're not ever going to think anything other than, have I got what I need to make this work? I need to make it work now. It's just a completely different perspective. You're not going to be thinking about logistics, supply chains. You're not going to be thinking about costings. And of course, like you quite rightly say, that comes right to the forefront when we start looking at the private world of private enterprise. And there's other things as well that kind of filter in of, you know, how we interact with the customer, how we interact with our colleagues, how we understand how these different worlds align. And I think you've absolutely nailed it there, where it's, you know, if we come in and this discrepancy isn't understood, then we're going to be putting round pegs in square holes in terms of how we approach handling it. And as you quite eruditely outlined, that can be a domino effect that can cause huge costs, not just to the organisation, but to the engineer as well. You know, you mentioned relocation, all of these kind of things. You know, we have to factor that in as well. You know, the decisions that the engineer will make, you know, in terms of their life and work balance. I suppose one of the things that really strikes me is we really need to have this top line. This is what we want from our engineers, and we have to understand that there's technical expertise is increasingly it's how we interact with the customer. You know, in this digital world now, having somebody go onto a customer site that fixes a problem and has a human-to-human interaction is more valuable than it's ever been. And I've always been an advocate of the importance of that service interaction. And so there's all these other elements. And if I'm understanding what you're saying right here, what we should be looking at is, okay, here's the top line of what our ideal persona looks like for a service engineer. Now, we've got these different personas that are coming in that can help, that we can mold into this top line. Some of them may be coming from trade school, and they're going to need a different series of integrations into the organization, the workflow, than these guys over here that are coming from the veteran pool of potential recruits. And so I think it's I come at a lot of these things from a problem-solving perspective, and I think the problem hasn't been quite answered by a lot of service organisations, in that they're just looking at, right, how do we get bodies in? And they're not looking at how do we get bodies in that will effectively integrate into the business. And that, for me, from the sounds of it, is something that's quite an important part of the puzzle that's missing for an awful lot of organisations, and stuff that you kind of delve into in the book. Have I got that right? Can we speak a little bit more about that?
You have it precisely right, yeah. One more thing that occurs to me, though, as we discuss this, and this turns out to be a peculiarly American problem. In the American military, uniformed military personnel are essentially free to the program. And what I mean when I say that is, let's say we've got a program to maintain, aircraft, fighter aircraft in San Diego. The uniformed human beings that do that maintenance, the organization, the maintenance organization that pays, that's responsible for maintaining those aircraft, do not budget for the human beings in uniform. That comes out of a different pot of money. So to them, it's essentially free. And so their inclination is to throw human beings at the problem because they don't pay for the human beings. So they err on the side of more people rather than on the side of lower total cost because they don't pay for the people. Now, I'll give you an example in the IT service industry that I had personal experience with. My business ran a data center for the United States Marine Corps. We did it with it was a large data center, and we operated that data center with 15 of my employees. On average, these employees were 20-year experienced, extremely experienced people that operated the data center extremely well. The United States Marine Corps decided operating that data center was a skill they wanted their uniformed Marines to be able to do. So they decided to cancel our contract and internalize that work, transition the work from the contractor to the Marine Corps, and have uniformed people doing it. They assigned 60 Marines to do what my 15 contractors were doing. And the average age of those 60 Marines was 24, when the average age of my employees was 40. And so you can understand the different level of experience between a guy who's been in the industry for 20 years and a guy who's been in the industry for 3 years. So the total price of operating that data center went extremely up, went way up, and the operational availability of that data center went way down. It suffered more outages, more data loss. It was operated much more broadly. So the Marine Corps decided to reverse that decision and transferred back to my company. Now, here's the problem. When we lost the contract, we reassigned most of those people. So we tried to hire some of the Marines as civilian contractors, and they couldn't operate under that environment, right? Because they didn't have enough experience. They couldn't get their minds around how we had operated the data center with 15 when it took them 60. And so it became difficult for us to replicate the program that we had been running very efficiently previously, right? And so there becomes that problem where you may hire people from the service who are operating with a significantly greater number of manpower than a private company would do the same work for, right? A maintenance facility on a 737 may use 5 technicians when a P-8 737 for the RAF would use 40, right?
Yes.
And so it's there's an apples to oranges issue there that the company has to understand.